Hey everybody, welcome back to the Saltworks podcast. I'm your host, Hallie Dye. Your favorite co-host, Lindsay Stagg, will be on with us today. And we have a very special guest. Andrew Dodson is here with us, sharing his story, his heart behind what he does. It is so good. I think one of the things that has stuck with me the most is the way Andrew's story just illustrates how we have to be willing to jump, even if we don't know what comes next, even if it doesn't make sense or feels scary or costs too much. And I think listening to Andrew's story, you will hear that and be encouraged to do that in the areas that you're feeling called to. I think hearing Andrew's heart for leading men and women and families and churches to look to what God has for them, to look at how to follow the Spirit, how to follow God's voice. And I think we see that all in Andrew's story. So I can't wait for you to hear it. Here's our conversation with Andrew. All right. Well, Andrew, welcome to the Saltworks podcast. We're excited to have you.
Thanks for having me.
It's really exciting. I feel like I do know you because I know Helen, but I feel like I know you through other people. We'll just leave it at that. But who is Andrew Dodson for those who don't know you or don't know everything about you?
Well, practically, I'm husband to Helen, father to Jackson and Andrew Walker.
Yeah.
I am trained as a counselor, very passionate about discipleship, seeing men and women grow into who God created them to be. Church member, hopefully growing community member, child of God.
Yeah. Those are all such important roles and facets of what I know you do, and I know we'll hear a lot more. Tell us about growing up. Take us back to childhood. You didn't grow up in Louisiana, right?
I did not. I'm a transplant.
Okay.
I was born in Hot Springs, Arkansas.
Yeah.
Several generations of my family and my wife's family had been in Hot Springs, Arkansas.
I didn't realize she was from Hot Springs
Both
as well.
of us
Okay.
are, right.
That's
so
awesome.
It's a little strange that we're here, to be honest.
Yeah.
It's a violation of lots of our family's
We'll allow
desires.
it. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I grew up there. Dad had a small business. Mom was a homemaker, very involved in church. Actually, my uncle had been an engineer and involved in the family business as well, but went to seminary in his early 30s, came back, started a church. I still remember meeting in the living room of some family friends with,
Yeah.
I was probably 9, 10 years old, running around. And that's the church I ended up sort of growing up in, called Lake Valley Community Church.
That's awesome.
But when my dad was 40-ish, he sold the business and moved us all to Colorado.
Wow.
That's a shift.
Right? No, it's very unexpected, very out of character for the family and expectations. But like he went to Denver Seminary to be a counselor, to train to be a counselor.
Wow.
People thought he was crazy.
Yeah.
And the older I get, it was kind of normal for me because it was what was going on as a 13, 14-year-old. But the older I get, I'm like, whoa, like I'm 42 now. So he was about my age when he moved his whole family.
Yeah.
Sold a business, moved his whole family across the country, and people thought he was nuts because it's what God told me to do.
Yeah.
It was a real move of faith. And I think honestly, that sort of represents some of the core DNA of my family and my household. My dad's father was a first generation believer, but an incredible man of God, like laid the bricks at Second Baptist in Hot Springs, Arkansas, was a deacon for a long, long time. Actually, he was kind of the anchor of our family. Like my cousins and aunt and uncle would hang out at their house on Lake Hamilton for most holidays and stuff.
That's awesome.
He and my grandmother, and they continued to attend Second Baptist long after my dad and uncle started this other church. So they're very invested there.
Yeah.
They ran what was called the prayer chapel in Hot Springs, and so at Second Baptist. And so I still remember I would stay the night with them sometimes on Saturday night. We would get up before the sun came up. We would go eat breakfast at McDonald's at 5 a.m.
Yeah.
And then go sit in the prayer chapel for 2 hours while they would just meet with people who came in the door.
Wow.
And they did that faithfully for decades.
Wow. So what did that look like? They just like people would come in and they'd pray with them.
Yeah.
That's what it was.
They
Wow.
had a little waiting room, and then they had prayer rooms where they would go in and just pray.
That's
I have very vague memories of it, right?
Mhm.
So when I was 14, Dad moved us to Colorado. That sort of marks a major break.
Yeah.
In my childhood.
Mm.
It was pretty idyllic to that point in lots of ways.
Yeah.
I had some struggles as a kid that maybe end up being relevant as we talk about this stuff, but I was pretty protected, very innocent, very, very churched in the traditional sense.
Yeah.
But when I moved to Colorado, the rails were off, right? I still remember this conversation with my mom and dad where I had asked to go stay the night with someone, as a freshman in high school, new kid. And Dad says, well, we don't know their parents. And I knew this was manipulative. Yeah. I said, you don't know anyone's parents. Right? You moved me all the way over here. You can't do that. Right. And so that was sort of the beginning of sort of me breaking out of the framework that had protected me so much. Right. So 14 to 19 was a disaster. Yeah. I mean, I ended up, smoking pot all the time and partying, drinking. It's pretty wild.
What do you think like made that shift for you? Just like, did you feel rebellious at the fact that y'all moved?
No, I wasn't rebellious.
Yeah.
But I was really broken.
Yeah.
Right. I was a super tender kid and like had a lot of wounds as a kid, just socially, and then felt really lost, in high school, like just not having a church home, not having a family context, none of that stuff.
Right.
So I was looking for any port in the storm.
Yeah.
And so when I was accepted, socially, and it's like, oh, well, I guess this is what we're doing.
Yeah.
I had trepidation and fear about it, but, I've since, in later life worked with a lot of adolescent males, at least did, I partner in a faith-based rehab where I kind of worked with a lot of these families in really hard cases. I was that kid, and I ended up telling parents a lot, like, it's like heroin, trying to tell a kid that's 14, 15, 16, 17, who has a real wound, like, hey, you can't have those relationships that are filling this void and filling this hole. I mean, that's tough.
Yeah.
Right. And that's certainly where I was. It was like water. It was like
that acceptance and like having a place of belonging.
100%.
Yeah. I mean, I get that. I think we do that as an adult, like it might not be it might not be in that regard, but all the time we do that, So going into high school, that's kind of the season that you're in. You've got this place of belonging. It doesn't look like necessarily the way that you were raised, So did you say in your notes you didn't finish high school?
No, I dropped out of high school.
Dropped out. How did you finish?
It is an entertaining story.
Okay, yeah. I want to hear it.
Yeah, so like that was weird because like both my parents went to college. Most of my grandparents graduated college. Like, so it was very much expected that I would finish high school. I've never told quite this part of the story. I don't even know if my parents know this part of the story, but I was pretty much smoking pot every day and like sleeping in the back of my Bronco in the parking lot so that when Dad drove by, he wouldn't know I wasn't in school. And I ended up getting tested for mono somehow. And they thought that I had mono. And I'm pretty sure I never had mono, actually.
Yeah.
But at any rate, I'm out of school for a month.
Yeah.
Right. And I've got this like stack of work.
Yeah.
And I was super bored in high school anyway.
Yeah.
And long story short, we met with the like guidance counselor and I was like, this isn't working. And they were like, well, he could just take classes at a community college. And I was like, all right, let's do that. Let's do that thing. And I was not well suited for high school. Like, I don't like authority. I like freedom. I don't like structure. It is not well suited to a boy like I was.
Yeah. I don't think anybody can picture that.
Right. You can't imagine that. Right. So yeah, I started taking college courses, but with zero supervision. I was 16 maybe.
Yeah.
And I didn't go to really the classes or anything.
Yeah.
So I'll fast forward a little bit and we can back up again. So I eventually, and I'm going to tell part of the story about how I got there because it's really an important part of my testimony. Eventually, I ended up back in Hot Springs, at my grandfather's house, lake house I was telling you about earlier that we all hung out at.
Yeah.
And I ended up at Garland County Community College. We sometimes we call it GI Tried. G-Tri-C is what it was known for. So I was back there taking, and I was signing up, and I actually don't even have a GED. So I'm enrolling in this deal, and the deal is you have to kind of take a practice test so you can get approved to take the GED. Even 20 however many years ago that was. And I did really well on the practice test. So I went to the lady, the dean of the school, said, "Hey, I don't have time to take this until the deadline. Can you just let me enroll?" She's like, "Yeah, take it later. It's fine. No problem."
Yeah.
And so I enrolled, but I never took the GED. And then I ended up transferring the next semester to the University of Arkansas. And so the rest is history. But I would have these nightmares like for decades about like, oh my God, they found out, right? They're going to make me go back. They're going to make me go back.
We all have those. Mine was, I do remember doing that with school some, like you have a test and because I skipped a lot of class, until it was test day. It was LSU and they didn't know who was there and who wasn't. But mine was always like, I needed to feed the baby and they were like, I didn't have a car and they were at home by themselves. That was my nightmare. So you never did finish.
No, I don't have a high school diploma.
Still breaking the rules today.
That's wild.
Right. No, I would literally wait. It stopped 7 or 8 years ago.
Yeah.
But I would wake up and say, kind of in a panic and go, okay, wait, now they can't take my degree from me. Right. Even if they find this out, I'm like, no, that's pretty solid. I think that I'm okay.
I feel better homeschooling my kids right now. Like this is grace for me. So this is great.
I think it's a good decision.
Yeah. Thank you. To finish or to homeschool?
To homeschool.
Okay.
Usually finishing is also.
Good idea.
Okay. Well, so that's kind of the backstory. Backtrack to what did take you back to Colorado.
Okay. So it's hard to overstate how lost I was, right, in high school. And then obviously dropping out, it's pretty evident, right? Things aren't going great. I was meeting with this counselor who was a really good guy, cool guy. And he basically told my dad, like, let him move out. Like, why are you, he's about to be 18, let him go. And this is not something my family would have typically done. They would have nurtured me and let me be a deadbeat until I was 30, buying cars and houses and taking care of me. So it was probably a really good thing, but it was a disaster of a mess in the short term. Right. So, I got an apartment and I have this job that really can't pay for the apartment and no plan. I got involved in kind of a multi-level marketing scheme selling telecommunications products. Right? It was just,
who among us?
I was so directionless. And so I ended up living in Boulder with a friend of mine who had a condo there. And neither of us were in school, but most of our peers at that point were at CU in Boulder. So we would hang out and do the things. And one day, one night, it was probably 2 a.m. to the best of my memory. I'm walking from this condo to a gas station, looking at the sky, and something just says, go to Hot Springs. Right. And in retrospect, I know this to be the voice of the Father.
Right.
Right. It was okay. So I get in the car. I slept for maybe 3 hours, got in the car and drove straight to my grandfather's house, 16 hours away. The friend I was staying with, we had traveled to Canada together and Mexico together. And when I woke up that morning and told him what I was doing, he said, can I come? I was like, no, you can't. And I didn't know why. I just knew he couldn't come. Right. Which was very weird. Just kind of another piece of how clearly God's hand was on it. So I land at my grandfather's house, not even knowing why I'm there. And he ends up giving me a book called Desire of the Everlasting Hills, which is written by Thomas Cahill, who's a secular author. But it's about Jesus, right? It's basically just the story of Jesus and his disciples and how weird that whole story really is.
Yeah.
So I'm in my grandfather's attic reading this book. I was always a big reader. I'm like, oh, Jesus is who he says he is. I was churched enough to know what to do then. So I got on my knees, gave my life to the Lord. Everything changed after that.
That's crazy.
Yeah, everything changed after that. It was not a, okay, I'm better today story,
Right.
but everything did change.
Yeah. I mean, I think about your parents' perspective too. And I think about like parents listening who are like, how did they do that?
Yeah.
Like, what encouragement do you have for parents? Because I know you mentioned earlier, like you do pour into parents sometimes who are going through these seasons, and maybe it's not the exact same scenario, but you're concerned.
Yeah, I'm glad you picked up on that thread. I thought about that this morning as maybe kind of one of the more important parts of my story, especially for your audience. So back to first a little bit of my childhood. I was not the kid that goes to OCS and does well, right? I was attention deficit, hyperactive, like just not well suited to the high structure, high order, effeminized culture of school, right?
Yeah, I get it.
Early education. And so my parents tried everything, right? Eventually they put me on medication, put me on, I think at the time it was Dexedrine, and then eventually Adderall, right?
Well, listen, you don't want me to go down the rabbit hole of school, you know?
Yeah, we could talk probably a lot just on that.
Yeah,
we could talk hours just on that, probably. And so I was super lost. I mean, even in junior high, they moved me to an alternative school for a semester to try it because things just were not working for me. This was as a 7th grader. And I would say that, like, I didn't know, my teachers and peers would have said I was kind of a slow kid, right? And I was not.
Yeah, you're bored, probably.
Yeah, and so it's interesting. I mean, it's just interesting how hugely it can be missed.
Yeah.
Like, I was so missed.
Yeah.
And
so many of those things can be like superpowers when you find the thing you are meant to focus on.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Well, we also know too, like, one of the like top like misdiagnoses is between like identifying a gifted kid and a kid with ADHD. Like, there are so many things that are similar that it's like,
that's right.
It's missed or it's misinterpreted in the school system a lot of times.
That's right. Well, and you guys know what I do for a living, right? Like, I mean, I have a secular PhD in a mental health field. And so, like, I know that diagnoses are things, but I'm not even sure what ADD is.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So just leave that there.
Well, it's like, I'm not going to go down the rabbit hole. I am showing
maybe we should have it back and go down the rabbit hole one day.
That's a different, we'll have that podcast another time. But like, if you research the school system, and I'll just say this much for somebody who wants to look into it. If you research our school system and how it's created, not saying there aren't wonderful schools, not saying it's not good in a lot of ways. I went through it and I had a good experience, but it is broken. And if we can't see that it's broken and that it's created for one outcome and one personality type, we need to do some more researching.
Yeah, it was designed to create good factory workers in Germany. Right. That's why there are bells. Right. I mean, that's what it's designed for. So, yeah, I mean, I do think that's another conversation. But all to say, like, I was lost in it. Right. And my son, I have an adopted son, Jackson, who's 17. He's actually very similar to me, too. But I also have a 9-year-old Andrew Walker. He is so much like me. And so I'm having these same sorts of, you know, how do we give him what he needs? Because I am not going to allow him to waste a decade of his life. One of the richest, most formative decades of his life, languishing. Right. So that's a nut I have to crack. And again, another conversation. And so I guess probably your question was about my parents and how they dealt with that. It was very difficult for them during that season. And then they watched me as a 16-year-old totally go off the reservation. Right. And I think they kind of just threw their hands up at some point. And it probably wasn't until I was in my early 30s that Dad actually really knew I was okay. Not because he didn't see me back on track. I mean, I had finished school by then and was like, had a family and was doing okay. But I actually ended up leading he founded a ministry called For King and Kingdom. And I ended up leading a retreat there that he was there because he supervises the ministry. And he heard my testimony and heard me speak to men. And he was like, oh, thank God.
Yeah.
But it's just such a redemption story.
Mm-hmm.
I think if there's anything that typifies my story, and I would say this to parents and just people in general, it's like God is faithful.
Mm-hmm.
Like at 19, when I got on my knees in my grandfather's attic, it is fairly impossible to overstate how disordered and how much of a mess I was as a human, right? It would take an hour to go into just the contours of that.
Mm-hmm.
And God has just faithfully drugged me out by my hair.
Yeah.
And so I would just say that to parents, like, God's redemption arcs are often much longer and different than we would like them to be.
Yeah.
So
I know that'll come back up in your story as well. So you end up staying in Hot Springs from that point?
for a year.
For a year.
Mhm.
Okay. And then what shifted after that?
I just enrolled at University of Arkansas.
That's right.
So it's how lost I was. So again, I referred to my uncle. He's kind of an academic. He was the preacher. And I said, hey, I want you to mentor me in the great books, right? Because he was a big reader and stuff too. And he's like, I'll do it, but you got to go to school and you got to get a job. Okay. And so I was like, okay, I got a job at the small engine shop that was down the road, and I enrolled in classes at Garland County Community College. I don't know that I would have done either of those things otherwise. That's how disordered I was. I was like, so I did that, and then it was like, well, I guess I can transfer to, it's kind of a loophole for people that don't know it in the whole university system. It's, you can transfer to most places in the country pretty easily. So
I want to, before we go forward into like the academic part of your story, because that is a big part because of what you do now. But I want to ask too, you mentioned, and I'm going to butcher how you said it, but earlier when you said it's not like everything just got better, but everything did change. What were your expectations at that point? Do you think it was that things are better and they're totally shifting? And because I think people do have that mindset, even after walking with the Lord for 20 plus years of this is gonna make everything better and easy.
No, it's such a good question. I didn't have any expectations, right? So after 14, I was never really in church. Like, parents tried to get us in a church, and it was just weird. We were in a suburb of Denver. It was just so many we just never got, grounded. And so I had enough in my DNA to kind of be oriented towards the gospel and towards, faith, but I didn't have enough to have an expectation. So after that, I read the Bible alone. I had this little, this set of cassette tapes of the New Testament that my grandfather had, and I had them in my car, and they were on nonstop, right? I listened to the Gospels over and over and over again. But I wrestled deeply with sin and brokenness for a decade from then, right? Like, there's a great line in Augustine. He said, there were two wills in me, one new and the other old, and the discord undid my soul. 100%. Like, that is exactly what the next decade felt like to me.
Yeah.
And some of the last one, right? Like, I mean, I kept waiting to round the corner for the fairy dust to kick in, right? For the things to just be easy.
Yeah.
That's not a thing, right? Now, you do progress in righteousness. Sanctification is real, right? I do not struggle in the same ways that I did 20 years ago, but there are sure artifacts of it, right? And I struggle with new things. I had a client a couple weeks ago who's a new believer, and he's in some ways constituted like me in that he's just a deep feeler, and he's wrestling and he's trying to figure the things out. And we're just talking, he doesn't know any of this language. We're talking about sanctification. And he's like, well, can I speed it up? I'm like, bro, I mean, I think it ends in martyrdom, right? So, like, I'm not sure, if you could speed it up, that's where it's headed.
Yeah.
Right. It's just embracing the idea that suffering is the path. Well, I think it's the only appropriate posture.
Yeah.
I don't know if that answers your question.
No, it does. Like.
Well, and I think just to pause too, like, this is kind of a side note, simple thought, but like, I love how you have said, like, growing up in the church, like it was just in my DNA. So even though you hadn't given your life to Christ until you were older, you did grow up in church. And I think that's an encouragement even for parents that like, hey, you might have a kid that like you cannot force a path on a kid. But you can have them where they're hearing truth and they know truth. And at some point, like just knowing that like that is embedded in, like you said, in your DNA. I love that figure of speech, just that because you knew at that point what to do because you had been, I don't know. I think that's encouraging.
Yeah. And I mean, this stuff gets real far past my pay grade real quick, but like, God's word accomplishes what it set out to accomplish, right? Like what he implanted in me as a child, what my parents implanted me in as a child, bore fruit, was going to bear fruit. And again, like you can build a theology on that that's probably not wise, right? But there's something there. And I think, faithful stewarding of your child's heart, no matter what the circumstances, the present circumstances, like is the only right thing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. When in this did you meet Helen?
Okay. So she was 2 years older than me, is still 2 years older than me. But so I had a best friend, David Johnson. She had a best friend, Amanda Johnson. Amanda Johnson was David's older sister. So I knew Helen. She says she knew me, but I doubt it, right? I doubt it. That's not how that usually works.
I don't know. She does seem to know everybody.
She does seem to know everybody.
She has that gift.
Yeah, so I came back when I was staying with my grandfather that summer, and I sat down next to her on a bench in the lobby of the church, and we just hit it off. And she was like, "Hey, you want to come out to the lake with me this afternoon?" And I said, "You bet." And so it kind of went from there. I actually, I had a period where I went back to school and we didn't kind of make it official or whatever. And I was like, what did you do? That was so stupid. Like you should have locked that down.
Yeah.
And anyway, God put us back together. God put us back together. So we actually met in an Acts class. So we met on that bench and then we ended up in an Acts class together over the summer that my uncle was teaching, and kind of the rest is history. That when we started dating the year after that, like it was like a country romance song. There's this country song where he says, "What a beautiful mess I'm in." He gets up, he stays up all night and he has to go to work and he's really tired. Boss says he's going to get fired. Right. And that was it. Like I had this demo job at a construction company this summer. I had come home to pay off some credit card debt that I had accrued as a college student. So I had $2,000 of debt to pay off, and I worked full time for $10 an hour at the time, which was pretty good. And I had the exact same amount of debt when I left for school because we just went out every night.
Worth it.
Worth it, baby. Yes.
Take that, Dave Ramsey.
Yeah, that's right.
So why counseling? Like, what did you know as you're doing classes? You said earlier, like, I had no expectations, no plan. When did that become, I think I want to seek this? And did you plan on using that for counseling?
Yeah, no, not at all. I still don't really consider myself a counselor, actually.
Interesting.
And I could talk more about what that means, right? No, so I was in college a year, and then I went on this trip to Alaska with a couple of friends of mine and spent 2 months in Alaska, just like backpacking, hiking, doing all this stuff. We actually drove from Arkansas.
Wow.
And so it was a really precious time with God. Like it was just super mountaintop kind of experience in more ways than one. And God just put in my heart, like specifically to see men become who they're capable of being, right? To see men become fully who God created them to be. And I didn't even know what that meant as a 20-year-old, but like he planted it in my heart.
Yeah.
And I had read John Eldridge at that point, right? It's about when that came out, which had a pretty big impact on me. I just knew this is what I want to do. And, I got out of University of Arkansas with a philosophy and psychology undergrad. And so I took a job as a broker for a logistics company doing business to business sales. And 18 months in, it's like, well, I guess I'll go to school for counseling.
Yeah.
Right? This seems like the right way to go forward with this plan. So it wasn't really well thought out, to be honest. It was just like, And I actually think that's kind of my philosophy of how you navigate the universe. It's like, just do the next right thing.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And God orders our steps.
Yeah.
Right.
Did any part of that decision have to do with seeing your dad make that switch later in his life?
No, I'm sure there was some influence there.
Yeah.
Right. Obviously, I knew it was a thing.
Yeah.
But I don't remember even thinking that way at all.
Mm-hmm.
I think the causality of that is actually flipped.
Mm-hmm.
I think God created our family to do those sorts of things.
Mm-hmm.
And so he ended up, I mean, one of the things he'll tell you is like why he was called, he's like, for 10 years, he's running a business, and he's like, I just end up sitting with people talking about their problem. They come to me like,
Mm-hmm.
he was an elder and stuff. And so it was but he was like, this is sort of what I really do.
Right.
Right. And I think it was just, I think it's what God made me to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I think counseling is just a vehicle for that.
Yeah.
Right.
I love it because it feels like it kind of piggybacks off of stuff we talked about last week. We talked about raising teens. My sister actually came. She's got 3 teens. Mm-hmm. And so we were talking about that. And just like one of the things she feels led to like impress on her kids is like be a lifelong learner. Mm-hmm. And we were talking about like one of the best teachers I ever had. I had a lot of great teachers, but one of them that stands out in my mind, I think she became a teacher in her 40s. And like, I can't imagine a world where she's not teaching, but like the blessing of being like, you're not behind, like switch gears, change your mind, follow the Spirit
100%.
Is a freedom that a lot of time our society does not offer.
That's right.
Or talk about.
Well, I think the story arcs of God's children are just different. And it doesn't follow the world's rhythm. I think about Joseph a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I mean.
Talk about that, because I know that was, well, we're going to get there, aren't we?
We can talk about Joseph.
Go for it. Go for it.
Right. So Joseph is elevated, right? Given the Technicolor dream code and told that he's going to be the one of his brothers that's going to be honored. Okay, so he's here. They throw him in a pit and sell him to slavery, right? And okay, so not going so hot, and then ends up in Potiphar's house as a servant. Apparently works his way up, right? I kind of imagine that ends up kind of chief of staff to this really important person in the society he was in. So he's elevated again, right? And then he's falsely accused and thrown in prison, right? Okay, not looking so hot.
Yeah.
We don't even know how long he's there, at least a couple years, right? And so I'm sure he's got some questions for God at that point.
Yeah.
What's happening here? And then he's made ruler of the known world, right? For all intents and purposes, he's Pharaoh's right-hand man, right? Like, that's not the story arc that the world tells us, right? That is plow the row you're in and leave the big picture to God, right? And to the degree there's volition in their act with conviction, which he does later in his story, with his brothers and the redemption that's there. And so to your point about being 40 and a teacher, again, everyone thought Dad was crazy, but now he's 68.
Yeah.
He's been doing it for 28 years.
Yeah.
He's only known that way.
Yeah.
He started a men's ministry that's in multiple states and has affected hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of men. So
I think too, like just the way you said that, I felt like this clicked in my mind. I don't know if I can say this well, but just, I think sometimes when you think of making a switch in your 30s, 40s, past that point, you think it's going to be starting over just like it felt when you were getting started in your 20s. But usually it's a thing you've been honing and crafting for a long time.
A lot of truth to that.
And so like, like going back to Joseph's story, like, he was gifted and equipped to do the thing that he ended up being placed in.
That's right.
So like the time wasn't lost, but also it wasn't starting over.
I think that is such a critical point about that story. It's like, that was all preparation, like no question. Because for a man to have, the privilege and power that he had, and to be able to act in the circumstances that he met with the integrity and compassion and character of God, frankly, that he did, like, that shaped over decades, right? That is not just a decision you happen to make right.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So good. Okay. So we talked about counseling. At what point did y'all make the move to Monroe?
That's kind of a fun story too. There's some tragedy in that story. Like, Helen was pregnant we thought we were going to move to Hot Springs at that point. It's like, all right, I have a master's degree. Helen is, pregnant. Dad has a counseling practice. I can go work with him. Easy peasy, right?
Yeah.
So Helen has a miscarriage, of which we've had many. And we were kind of like, oh, now what? Right. And so I'm really wrestling. Now, this is like in November of probably 2012, something like that, 2011. Yeah, 2011 would have been 2011. And I'm like, all right, well, I guess I'm going to go get a PhD, like start applying for schools and whatever. So I started that process. And God's like, no, stop. Like, okay. November goes by, December goes by, January goes by. Late February, and I don't even remember the sequence of everything that happened during that time, but it was, it was complicated and hard, and I was still not very together as a person, to be honest. And God's like, okay, I want you to go to Monroe. I'm like, okay. I mean, I'd spent a day walking just to ask. I had a professor that had come here, from John Brown to do his PhD. And I'm like, well, God, all the deadlines are over, right? Like, I wanted to go to Purdue. I wanted to do family systems, which is what I ended up doing here. And Purdue at the time had the best program. And I was like, all right, I'm going to go to Purdue. This is back when I still cared about my degree. And so I go and I say, all right, God, you said to go to Monroe. I'll look at the thing, but I'm telling you, deadlines are over. It was the only deadline that wasn't over. Right. So I was like, okay, I'll apply, So it's the only place I applied. And I got in, and I really thought, and God just opened doors, like, to that whole thing. It was super easy and just down to the job I got and all the things. I just thought I was going to be here for a couple of years, and then I even planned to write my dissertation remotely. I was like, I'll do the coursework and get out of here, go back home. And God's like, nope. He plugged me in deep ways, like with mentoring and just people that were discipling me and community and all of that. And just started giving me work to do.
Yeah.
Right. And yeah, at this point, it's super clear that, like, unless God changes the trajectory, this is home.
Right.
Like, for sure, something really weird would have to happen for that to change. But it was surprising. It's another great example of, like, God's sovereign. For years, my brother has been mad that I didn't move home. Yeah. He just can't understand there's a higher loyalty, than family. And my dad does. He gets it.
Yeah.
My brother doesn't.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's how that happened. We've been here, 13, 14 years now.
Wow. So. Yeah. That's awesome. So you said you got, like, even the door opening with your job. Was that the center?
Yeah. So for children and families.
Okay.
There's a lot of story there. Yeah.
Yeah. I'd love for you to go into that, because I know that's another chapter of wrestling and kind of waiting.
Big time.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So the Center for Children and Families is like a local community counseling center agency.
And
yeah, go ahead.
You speak super well of it, because Emily Jones will have our heads.
Yeah, right. Well, it was I will speak well of it. I have a lot of good things to say about it. So, I mean, I'm really entwined with that whole thing. So this professor I was telling you about, his name was Ryan Reyna. He had been here and gotten his PhD here, like, 10 years before I did. And he said, what you need to do, after he found out I was doing this, he said, what you need to do is you need to move to Monroe, and you need to learn everything you can from a woman named Cindy Murray. I'm like, okay, all right. And so Cindy was at that time the CEO of the Center for Children and Families. So this was the first place I applied for a job. She didn't know me. Like, I didn't have to talk to her. I got a job. I mean, at that time there were 50 employees, right? So I made one phone call, applied for one job, got the job, one interview. Like, okay, I guess this is what we're doing. And Cindy and I became, like, I sat down with Cindy at dinner one night. They used to do this thing where, like, the new employees they would have dinner with, the leadership team or whatever. And I was like, Ryan Rayner said I need to know you and I need to learn everything you have to say. And she's like, this is weird. We ended up kind of being best friends.
Awesome.
We ended up kind of spending a lot of time together. She's 15 years older than me. And so she adopted Jackson, who is now my son, when he was 8 months old. And there's a real interesting God story to all of that if I try to tell it, I'll butcher it. But, like, God basically put him in a basket on her doorstep. Yeah, after he told her that this was about to happen. And so she got sick 5 or 6 years into my stay. And long story short, I ended up with Jackson after she died. But at the center is very much a Joseph story.
Mm-hmm.
I ended up working there I worked as a therapist there for 5 years, right? And no one does that, right? Unless they absolutely have to. But I don't think anyone has to enough to have ever done that. I think I'm the longest running person, because it's in-home family therapy. These are Medicaid clients. You're going into homes where, it's just tough. It's really tough work. Yeah. And so I got my PhD in the middle of that and stayed. I was still there because God was like, I don't know, you're staying.
Yeah.
And he was really burning a lot of things out of me, and kind of what he showed me, that was kind of when I really majored on Joseph's story. It's like, just plow the row you're in.
Yeah.
Right. Like, plow the row you're in. It is my job to direct your steps. Right. And so I did, and I kind of settled into it. I'm like, okay, this is what we're doing. We used to do these things there called huddle, where we would meet once a week and we would talk about a book or whatever, kind of like team building stuff. And we're doing one of those on a Wednesday morning. We're paired up with a partner, and the partner is supposed to ask these questions. And the question that she asked was, in what ways does your job challenge you? I was like, okay. Well, honestly, it doesn't. And I knew in that moment, I'm like, oh, this is over. Right. It's like God was just saying, all right, well, season's over. You've learned what you needed to learn. Within the next 4 weeks, this judge approached me, Ann McIntyre is her name, in Winsboro, Louisiana, which was one of the communities I was working in. It was like, hey, we've got a community foundation with $20 million, and we need someone to kind of head up a project here. Like, are you interested? I was like, I don't know. Like, no. And I'm laying in bed one night, and God's like, you're not paying attention. And he kind of gives me this sort of vision for what would become a project at the center called the Delta Project, where we kind of built community gardens and whatever. But it's just a great example of God just opening the door. He's like, here, that's not what people do. I mean, she basically said, hey, we want you to run it. We'll give the center, $400,000 a year for the program. And that meant I got promoted up 3 levels, right? I became a director of a segment of the organization. And it's like, that doesn't happen. People don't do that. And I watched 5 years where other people were, doing the things. And again, we've already talked about how I'm not very orderly or low like structure. So like, that's not my jam. And so it's just like, God just does it. God does things. And that's one of many, many, many times God has done that in my life. And so I did that for a couple of years. I ran the Delta Project for a couple of years and a couple other programs that I ran there. And I thought I'd be there forever too. I was like, I had drank the Kool-Aid for sure. They were my people. And one weekend I was traveling to Dallas doing a recruiting trip for therapists at the different schools there. And God's like, you're leaving. I'm like, wait, what? Like, you're leaving. So I pray about it like for the weekend, Normally I'd sit in a hotel room and watch TV and order pizza, but it was like, no. Like I was like, all right, God, you're gonna have to make this clear. Because I was honestly kind of scared, because I got into a place where I'm like, I'm doing this out of obedience. I'm like, I want this too much for it to be safe. Like I want to leave too much for it to be safe for me to believe that this is what you're telling me, right? Because I am not an employee at all. And no, he's like, no, you're leaving. And so on the way home, on the way back from Dallas, God gave me 5 truths. And they were just truths like for my boss, right? But they were truths like, if you knew who I was, you would never hire me for this position, right? And there were truths like that. And so I called him. I said, oh, we got to meet. So I just told him the 5 truths. And this is a good dude. Chris Ramsey's his name. He's like, means you're leaving, doesn't it? I'm like, yeah, I think so. He's like, okay. So we kind of figured it out. And it was a little more rocky than that and more emotions involved and whatever. But like, yeah, God was like, all right, next thing. So that's my short version of the story at the center.
Well, I want to pause for a second, just because I've had a conversation recently with someone close to me. And like, Andrew, I appreciate so much, like really just starting from just the story of Joseph and all of that when it comes to our lives and our jobs and the things that we navigate, and that I think one thing that I didn't know, 3 years ago and was clearly clueless to, that when we are genuinely like walking in step with the Lord and looking to him and asking for him to guide and letting him guide, and like you said, plan whatever road we're in, he is going to open doors. And the fact that it doesn't necessarily always mean it's not scary. It doesn't mean that it's not, it doesn't feel crazy or outlandish to the logical thinkers in the world to be like,
right.
No, that doesn't make any sense. That like, if we are really resting and trusting in the Lord, that like, he's going to make a way wherever he wants you to be.
Yes.
And I don't know, I just, like I said, just in the last few days, I've had a conversation with someone very close to me that like that, this will be such an encouragement.
Good.
So
just last night, Andrew and I were talking about, like spiritual discernment over spiritual warfare. Because we're sharing our story, parts of it tonight with the college group. And it's like, I can look back and like at the time, you forget the things that you didn't know. You know what I mean? You forget like when you were like, what is happening right now to me? And what is this feeling? And like, there's a distinct story that we don't have time to go into where I thought it was spiritual discernment and like later realized it was spiritual warfare. But that was the moment where I went, oh, in spiritual discernment, there might be a lot of unknowns, like what comes next and how is this going to look and am I going to be okay? And there can be fear about, I don't want to do this. But like in spiritual discernment, you pretty much know what you're supposed to do.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a great way to say it.
And like spiritual warfare just feels chaotic. It feels like I feel lost and stuck. I feel defeated. I feel there's not a way there. You don't see a way. And like, that was very helpful to me to realize as a young person, because like there's this spiritual heaviness to both that can be hard to distinguish.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, God's had me jump off a lot of cliffs.
Yeah.
And I think every time it's been like, no, I know.
Yeah.
Right. And there's a settled knowing that doesn't mean that can't come under attack too. And you don't have doubt and you don't have anxiety and you don't have fear in the midst of all of that. But I think, most people that have had the experience know what I'm talking about when I say there's a settled knowing. And I think, getting there just requires the humility to surrender, right? The humility to say, okay, God, whatever you want, I'll do. Right. And that takes some doing sometimes.
It does.
Right. It takes some doing sometimes.
Do you ever listen to Judah? He had a band called Judah and the Lion. And then he broke off and did something. He's a Christian singer, but he is edgy. But there's a song called I Am. I think it's a song. That is one that when I'm going through something where I'm like, I know I'm supposed to do this, or I know I'm supposed to speak this or whatever, and I don't, I listen to that. He's basically like singing from the perspective of the Father a little bit. And there's a part that's like, sometimes trust in me looks like a free fall.
Yeah.
Either way, I hope that you jump. And it's like, that's what it feels like.
That's right.
Sometimes.
Yeah. I don't think you can do it right and not have to do that.
Yeah.
Sometimes. Yeah. So yeah, to that point, like that's just kind of picking up with the story with that. Like that's dead on. It's like, I didn't know what I was going to do when I left. I just knew I was supposed to leave.
That was my next question. Did you have a plan?
No clue.
Yeah.
Right. At the time I had like a little bit of, I was doing like a day a week of private practice. So it was like an extra thing I was doing. And so I was like, all right, well, I have that, which represented like a fourth of my income. So it wasn't exactly like a good plan.
Yeah.
Right. I really didn't know. And I think, just to encourage people that are wrestling with these sorts of things in their lives, like when God has asked me to jump off cliffs, you never know what's on the other side until after you jump. Right. That's why it's a leap of faith. That's why faith is necessary. Yeah. So yeah, like that was December. I knew I was leaving at the end of the month, and I didn't know what I was going to do. And then I don't know, some people that are listening will know Trent Langhofer. He was a pastor at Whites Ferry Road Church locally. It's where the Duck Dynasty guys went for a long time. And he ran the Christian Counseling Center, and he also was a founding partner at the Carpenter Shed. And he had pursued me several times to get involved in both of those things. This is another story of like, you're not paying attention. And so short version of that story is I didn't have a job in January. And in February, Trent was leaving, and I took over the Christian Counseling Center, and I took over his role at the Carpenter Shed, eventually became a partner, and was running a foundation, community foundation that I had started in the intervening 60 days. Right. And it's like, okay, like God's got this. Right. Like, and I didn't orchestrate any of those things. There was no Andrew strategy. There was no, this is what we're going to do. It was just like, all right, here, son, this is what's next. Okay. This is what we're doing. And that's kind of just how he's come to work with me. So,
yeah, that's crazy. I mean, I feel like I want to pause and say, like, it's encouraging to me as a mom and just a person, that like the Lord will get their attention. You know what I mean?
That's right.
You might not be able to on some days, but the Lord will, you know, like that. I don't know. It's
Yeah. And to that point, just, I mean, as God got mine, right. And not just in the first call, right. But along the way, he regularly has had to get my attention. And I don't, you know, I have friends and acquaintances and that were just sort of raised in the church and culturally they're Christian. And sometimes it's kind of hard to know why they're doing it, you know? And a lot of those people would say those are places where it worked. Like the thing the parent was after worked because they didn't get out and go to bars or end up in prison or do drugs or whatever. But it's like, did it? You know, I don't know. Like, I think, you know, still remember crying in my my bedroom as a 15-year-old and telling my dad, I'm just afraid that if I don't believe what you believe, you're not going to love me. You know? Yeah. And he said, that's just not true, son. Right. Yeah. He let me go. Yeah. You know, because he didn't have the power to keep me anyway. Right. But God never let me go. Right. He trusted me to God. And I think, I think that's the only way to do it with kids. Yeah. You know,
which I mean is a layer of unconditional love, you know, that as a parent, you hurts to give in that scenario, but is crucial, you know?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. So you step into that role and you're working, was it full-time with the Carpenter Shed at that point?
Oh man, all those jobs, I probably had 3 full-time jobs and didn't do any of them well.
Well, I'm sure that's not true.
I was a clinical director at the Carpenter Shed and the only therapist. So it was like, it was a mess. Like, so the guys that started it, Trent Langhofer and Josh Hudnall, are both gunslingers, right? They're both very entrepreneurial in their disposition and like very disorderly, kind of like me in some ways. And so it was not like a well put together thing. I think part of my role in that whole deal was helping Josh figure out what was in his heart. Right. And so I walked with them through just kind of the pioneering of what is this thing going to be. And so I was probably doing that 10, 15 hours a week, 20 at some points. Through that period, I mean, Josh, who's the other partner, there's 2 other partners, Kyle Smith, Josh Hudnall, and then myself. Josh and Kyle both left their full-time ministry positions and jumped into this business. And so that was kind of this 3-year season that I walked with them through it. And I'm kind of good for about 36 months on a project. And it's like, I need to build something. Right. So I did that 20 hours a week for a while. And then the Christian Counseling Center, I just kind of, that was one where I really didn't want to do it. It was at Whites Ferry Road. There were 4 or 5 therapists there, and I got approached several times to do it. And I was like, no. And then God again was like, you're not paying attention. And it was kind of like, okay, well, I'll hold it together, right? Because somebody's got to deal with the scaffolding of this. And I just kind of put it on the shelf for a couple years, actually. So that didn't really require a ton of me. It probably should have required a lot more of me. It did. I mean, it demanded more than I was giving it. And then the Novare Foundation was like a stillborn child. So this is a place where I learned some things. Like, so if we remember going, there's some lessons in this that are worth kind of getting into the details a little bit. Like, so this person had given me this money, this organization, this community foundation had given the center this money, right, for me to run the Delta Project. Yeah. Right. And I was leaving the center. Right. And I had no intention of like continuing that work actually. I don't know what my intention was exactly. I just know it's leaving.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't have some plan that, hey, I'm gonna continue doing this work. But so I had built all these community gardens, one of which was in Winsboro, and like I'd dumped like $50,000 in grant money and stuff from the federal government, whatever. In it, we had a greenhouse and sheds and the whole nine. It's like on 3 acres. And when I heard the center's plan for it, which was just to kind of stash it somewhere essentially, where I didn't think it was going to get the attention it needed. I was like, no, you can't do that. Like I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, you know, they had kind of said, hey, well, we're not going to continue to give the money if you don't do it. And so I kind of was like, okay, I'll do it. You know, and so I ended up setting up this foundation and doing that job too. And really that season was over, right? I wasn't mature enough to discern though. I mean, I think God has grace for us in that.
Yeah.
And so like I ran that foundation for another year, hired a full-time director and tried to pass it off and just kind of be just it didn't go how it was supposed to go.
Yeah.
It was supposed to be over. And so I was doing that also. And then COVID happened that year. So it was a little weird anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's what I was doing.
Well, there might be some grace in knowing if it was going to get kind of pushed off and knowing like, well, I do know it wasn't meant to be because I tried it and it didn't.
That's
you know
right.
what I mean?
That's true.
Like,
there's no regret.
Yeah.
Right. There's some truth in that.
So how did Banner come about out of all of this?
That's another cliff jump.
Okay.
So the Christian Counseling Center, Jonelle Kirby started that. Was a vision of hers. She passed it off to, I want to say a guy named, well, I don't want to get it wrong. So eventually it landed in Trent's lap. And then Trent left it with me. Okay. It was just kind of one of 7 projects that I had going. And I saw some clients through that vehicle. Right. And about 2 or 3 years ago, this is another, you know, God tried to strip things from me and like grow me and heal me. He's like, hey, I want you to leave the carpenter shed. Right. Which at the time that was once again, the bulk of my income.
Right.
Right. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
You know, and so I walk away from that. I may have the plans to walk away from that. And I'm kind of like, now what? And I had some friends that I met with pretty regularly in Colorado. We would go up quarterly actually and do just kind of the spiritual development stuff and talk. And they asked me, well, like, what are you going to do? And I was like, I don't know, but I'm sure not doing counseling all day. And so we like kicked around the idea of like, we actually started a consulting firm and we're just like, yeah, there's no energy. And I just kept trying, I just feeling like there's no energy in this. Like, I don't want to do this. Like, this is just opportunistic, right? It's not my calling. I had another, you know, my uncle is really involved in a business called Vocare, where he has like works with all these high net worth individuals in Austin and Dallas and San Antonio. He's like, oh, you come work for us and whatever. And it's like, it should be perfectly aligned with me. I love working with high functioning people. Like it's a retreat sort of thing. And it's just like, no, it's not it. Right. Like, I don't know why, but I'm not supposed to do this. Right. And so Banner was forming at that time, right? Like, okay, well, I'm still putting pieces in place and I'm kind of putting a partnership together or whatever, which, you know, was complicated and messy because I didn't have my eye on the ball. And in the meantime, God had planted all this stuff in me around like the health of the local church, right? Intervening in the lives of churches, like to see them healthy and whole and solid and faithful. Seeing men and women and their households healthy and whole and solid and faithful, and what that means for the local church, right? One of the things I learned through the community stuff is that like programs don't fix people, right? You know, community gardens not helping anybody actually, if you don't deal with the spiritual root. Like, and so like God really redirected me to like back to my original sort of calling, which is the hearts of men and women, right? Like change happens in the heart, right? And then God goes and gives the increase, you know? And so that was gestating. I just didn't know Banner was meant to be the vehicle for that. Yeah. And over the last 3 years, God has made it very clear that Banner is the vehicle for that, right? Like, and so there's several pieces of that, some of which aren't super interesting. They're a little too inside baseball, but like what we essentially do, and what I'm passionate about building as a vehicle for that is we do. So people tend to land on our doorstep in one of three stages. Some of them need a rescue, right? You guys are familiar. I think you interviewed Tom Pride, right? He's one of our coaches.
Yeah.
He parachutes into churches or into households when conflict is extremely high. There's been a sexual abuse scandal. There's a pastor abusing his spouse, like whatever the case may be. Kids are abused in a youth group, whatever. He's the guy that shows up and says, this is how you do this faithfully. This is how you walk it out, right? So some people just need to be rescued, right? Some people just need, out of being beaten every night, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Some people, they've been rescued. They don't necessarily have big things going on like that, but they need stability in their lives, right? I need to learn how to walk in the rhythm of God. I need to learn how to be solid in the Lord and walk in the rhythm of the Spirit. And some people need strength, right?
Yeah.
Some people have had that, but they're not fully turned on and alive to who they're capable of being and what God is capable of doing in their lives. And that becomes, we have several coaches that are spiritual directors that have histories in ministry and those sorts of things. And it's like, that's for people that really want to understand, let me understand what it looks like to go deeper with the Lord in prayer. Let me understand what it looks like to really live inside my calling and not just have a vocation. Right. And so that's sort of what we do, both at the individual level and the organizational level. And it's become kind of my project. And I never thought I'd be able to say this, but it's probably a 20-year project. And I'm usually, like I said, I'm a 36-month guy. So,
So far. I want to circle back to something you said earlier in the conversation, because I know that you've set up some of that, but I'd love for you to speak specifically about you and all the things that you just said about you don't really consider yourself a counselor.
Yeah. Okay. So Dallas Willard has been a huge influence on my life. He says something in my favorite book of his, which is called Renovation of the Heart. He says the circumstances of your life and the situation in which you find yourself is almost entirely a consequence of who you have become in the core of your being. Right? Okay. So what's he saying? That's a profound statement. Saying whatever's going on with you has to do with what's in here. Right? Period. End of statement. Right? Relationships, job, life, circumstances, all is a direct result of what is in here. Okay. So I believe that. I think that's true. Okay. Therapy largely exists, and we could go into this deeper if you want. I'll give you the shortest possible version. As an outgrowth of a Freudian perspective that has philosophical antecedents in lots of places, but Freud's kind of the headwaters for the therapeutic purpose. And it's a technology, right, of self-awareness and self-knowledge that helps you navigate a nihilistic universe, a universe without meaning, right? And so it's fundamentally built on, okay, you don't feel good, let's make you feel good, right? Let's maximize your happiness. Let's maximize your pleasure. That is the orienting principle in all of therapy. And even Christian counseling, quote unquote, is fundamentally built on that edifice, right? I mean, most people that go into Christian counseling don't think deeply about it enough to really understand all the ways in which that manifests and show up, but it does. That's another hour conversation. So when people used to land in my office all the time, they would often say, I've never done counseling, not really never done therapy or whatever. And I'm like, well, I'm not really a therapist, so, we'll be all right. And they would say, well, what do you mean? And I'd say, I don't know. I just know I don't do that. Right. But I've had some clarity about that. I read a book a couple years ago. A guy named Philip Reif wrote a book called The Triumph of the Therapeutic, and he sort of picks this apart. And he talks about Freud, and that's kind of how it's built, is to be a technology of self-understanding for nihilistic people. But what therapist used to be is the local priest or the village elder, and what therapy used to be for thousands of years is let me align you with the sacred. If I can align you with the sacred, you'll be healthy. And to the degree that means something, right? And that's really what I do. That's really what Banner is about. I'm not interested in happiness, to be honest. Happiness is a great byproduct. It's a fun thing to have and awesome if you get it. But alignment with truth is what gets you to a place where the core of your being produces things that are good and right. Right. And that produces things that are actually valuable.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's why I don't do therapy. Even though I do think there are lots of good things in modern therapeutic techniques and practices and all that. Like, I mean, we do a lot of those things. Like, we do a lot of those things. Not really what I do.
Yeah.
But I have people that do a lot of those things. But if they're not grounded in, you know, divine truth and the sacred, then we're just rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm gonna say just put a Band-Aid on it.
Right.
Yeah.
Slap a Band-Aid on.
That's
yeah.
right.
Yeah. Well, it's like there are times where like emergency help is needed, but like that can't be always, you know, and like
That's right.
what's that going to look like going forward? You know what I mean?
Yeah, and just to speak to some of that just more pointedly, like, yeah, like I think it's a great idea sometimes for people to get on antidepressants or for, you know, people to use CBD or, you know, CBD, cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT. CBD is great too. But it's more of a recreational thing.
That is chasing happiness, perhaps.
No, like I think those tools are great.
Yeah.
Applied appropriately, but when they become God, it's a problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know? So
yeah, that's good. I feel like I want to ask this. I know the work that you do is powerful and worthy and effective. And I know you give God the glory in that, but I've seen the effects of it, you know, and I can say that. You can't say that, but I can. But what do you feel like the Lord, like what work do you feel like looking back on everything we've talked about has done in you as you're doing this work?
Oh gosh. Okay. So I have this spiritual mentor that was just I don't know, ordained as a minister, a head minister at a church. I think he had already been ordained, so whatever you call that. Like the elders prayed for him, and now he's in charge. So, and I went to that ordination on Sunday, and he gave a little sermonette. It was like it was a going away for the old pastor, and so there was a lot of ceremony and stuff. But he gave a little sermonette, and he preached out of Joel about something that I was not familiar with. He talked about, and I'm going to really butcher this because I've heard it once said, the former rains and the latter rains. So God sends and is in the former rains and the latter rains. Okay. I didn't know about the latter rains. Okay. And we're talking about rain, like rain on a desert, right? God sends them both. And when he sends the former rains, which is, you know, embodied in, you know, when I was 19 in my grandfather's attic and God called me and put his spirit in me. Like that's done its work and it's doing his work and will do its work forever. And during that season, you know, I remember a pastor asking me, you know, what do you want your life to be about? And I said, truth. I want to defend truth. Right. And I think I did that for a long time. And the work that he did in me in the former reigns in that 20 years, I think was about learning what a relationship with truth really means. Because the truth is a person, right? It's one of Jesus's names, right? I didn't know that when I was saying it, but loyalty to truth is loyalty to a person.
Right.
And all those cliff jumping episodes I told you about were about learning how to live in relationship with truth. And so I would tell you, like, just in that counseling context, there were all these times when it's like, God's like, you're going to have to say this. And I'm like, no, I'm going to look stupid if I say that, or they're not going to like me if I say that. And it's like, okay, all right, I guess we're jumping. Yeah. Right. And I probably did that 40 times in counseling sessions before it just became what I did. Right. I don't have any gifts as a counselor, like special, you know, that's all I do. I just show up and let God say, do this. Now, you know, you learn things, right? You see enough pitches and you learn to hit balls. But it's not because I have some special, you know, giftedness really. And so I would say that would be the thing I learned in the former reigns. that's the biggest thing, is how do you walk with the Lord, right? Both big picture in your own life and in relationship right now here in this room. What does it look like to not protect yourself, not feel like you have to look professional or look good or whatever, and just say what the Spirit is pulling you to say? And someone asked me yesterday, we had a little team meeting, and I mentioned this about that little sermon, like, what are the latter rains? What does that like foretell for you? Or like, what does it mean or whatever? And I told him that story about truth and about like that sort of being my swan song to some degree. I was like, but I think the next 20 years are about love. You know, I think I am not good at love naturally. I don't know that anybody is really.
That's what I was thinking.
I think we pretend that we are. And I think that we have things in us that we can call love, I suppose. But I think that's what God's going to do in the next 20 years, you know, and He's already doing some of it. I'm excited about that. I do think that it probably requires a lot more breaking and suffering and struggle. That's my hunch, but
yeah. It's really good. Thank you for sharing that with us. If you, I'll ask you this one more question because I know you've got stuff to get to. And Lindsay, I don't want to grab the narrative if you had something too, but if you could pick one takeaway, and I'll say mine from your story that I think, and we've said this before, maybe a lot of season two felt like jumping in a lot of areas. A
lot of my life has felt like jumping in a lot of areas.
Have you landed yet? Okay. But I think like this is something the Lord brings me back to a lot. In order to be faithful, you have to be willing to seem crazy. You have to be willing to be misunderstood. You have to be willing to feel crazy, you know, to say things that aren't going to be well received. Like, you look back at the prophets, man.
That's right.
They were not liked, but they were faithful, you know? Yes. And like, that's hard. That's a hard weight to carry. But like, in order to be faithful, you have to be willing to fill in the blank, you know, whatever that is. Yes. And so like, I feel like that sticks out to me in your story. But if you could pick one thing that you're like, hey, before you press stop on this episode, this is the takeaway that I would want every person to hear.
So I draw this thing for people sometimes, and I stole it. It's called the hero's journey. Okay, I have a whiteboard, and I, draw it on the whiteboard, and I'm not a very good drawer. So it's got a little cliff, and then a drop off, and then sharp, jagged rocks under the cliff, and then a field and a tree, right, and then another mountain, right. And one of the things I always tell people when I draw this is most people never do this, right? Most people just live in inertia, right? They just walk through life. And the thing that comes before the jump is always a call, right? And so are you willing to hear the call, right? That's the first question. Do you have the humility? Do you have the trust? Do you have the faith? Faith is actually what's required. To hear the call, to believe it's a thing, right? And when you hear it, are you willing to trust God enough to leap, right? To ascend the cliff and jump, because you never know what's underneath, and to trust God with that process. That's the biggest thing I want to encourage people to. It's like, have a willingness to hear the call and to answer it, and to trust God and Geronimo off the cliff, right? And I think, if you're doing it right, you kind of never stop living that way, right? And if you're doing it right, God is super faithful to kill all the things in you that are even bothered by living that way, right? And I think by the end of it, it's just like, yeah, that's just what we do, right? And it makes us available to be good husbands and wives and fathers and mothers and community members, and bring freedom and wholeness to the people in our lives and push back the darkness and advance the kingdom. That would be my call.
It's good. Thank you for that. Andrew, it's been so good. I know there was like 1,000 different things we could have talked about, Might have to go down the education rabbit hole in another episode. His eyes lit up for anyone listening. I'll narrate that part. But yeah, it was so good. I know. We enjoyed it a lot.
And just an encouragement. I mean, I can attest to the fact that like your goal and your vision and your heart for how therapy and counseling, should look is true to that. Like it is a reflection of that, and that's very evident. So just an encouragement to you that
I do need it.
That is how I would describe it.
I'm kind of a depressive by nature, and so I need all the encouragement I can
get. Well, thank you so much for coming today to make space in your schedule, because I know that it is busy, and also for the vulnerability to share your story and just where you've been, but also like where you are right now, and we really appreciate that.
Yeah, thanks guys. It's fun.
It was really fun. Thank you so much for coming. And thank y'all so much for listening in this week. We will see you next week on The Saltworks.
This is my story. This is your story.